Hey, I'm Nate. Welcome to an episode of You Made What? The outdoor show where I cook ridiculous food on camping equipment to prove that camping doesn't have to be boring, tasteless, simple meals, and that you can actually make some pretty impressive things in the outdoors. On this episode, we're making s'mores. But I'm not talking about these s'mores that you're all used to. I'm making everything from scratch. So we're making the graham crackers and we're making the marshmallows. Now I'm not making the chocolate because that seems really complicated, but we're doing everything from scratch that we possibly can do in the outdoors. So good. To make the marshmallows, first I started with half a cup of water and then 3 packets or 24 grams of gelatin. I gave that a mix to make sure everything was incorporated, and then I set it aside. And then in a saucepan, I brought a 1/4 cup of water, 2 cups of sugar, 3/4 cup of light corn syrup, and I brought that to a boil over about medium-high heat. I let that cook at a boil for about 1 minute before removing it from the heat. And while it was boiling, I didn't touch the mixture at all. I just let it continue to boil. After your sugary mixture is done, let it rest a little bit, and then into the bowl with the gelatin and water mixture, you will slowly stream in that mixture. I was doing this by hand, so I took it very slow and made sure to try to whisk out any of the clumps as I could as I was going. I made sure to add the syrupy mixture very slowly throughout this in small doses throughout the whole mixing process. Mixing this got pretty dang tiring. Normal recipes online call for a stand mixer, which would have been way better if I was inside, but hey, we're doing this outside, so I was doing this by hand. I had to stretch out my hands a couple of times and my fingers were getting tired, but we made it work. By the end, it was turning into a nice gelatinous, marshmallowy texture, and I was pretty pleased with the result. Once that was complete, I prepared the vessel that I would put this in to allow it to set. I had just a baking tin lying around, and recipes online call for parchment paper, but I used tin foil. You could see later on that might have been a mistake, but I thought it worked out fine. And I didn't have a cooking spray, so I just used olive oil. I thought that worked fine as well. And then poured the mixture in and set it aside for a minimum of 4 hours at room temperature. After the marshmallows were finished resting, covered the whole mixture in powdered sugar before I got to peeling the aluminum foil off. I brought them out and had a little bit of difficulty with the aluminum foil. I thought I had ruined it, but it was salvageable. I just had to work really carefully to make sure I got all of the aluminum foil out. It eventually came out in long strips. Probably would do it with parchment paper next, but this got the job done. And then before I started slicing, I rubbed my knife in as much powdered sugar as I could to just help it not stick. Stuck a little bit to the marshmallows, but it was able to cut it just fine. I cut these into pretty thick squares, as you can see. Once I was done cutting, I made sure to coat all of the sides in powdered sugar as well. Now, to be honest, I've never done this before, and I don't really know if it's possible. Typically with graham crackers, you need an oven so they can bake and get heat from all sides, but we'll see what happens on just a regular old 2-burner stove. To make the graham crackers, I started with 2 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. Then I added 1 1/2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, roughly, as you can see. Once the dry ingredients were complete, I started on the wet ingredients in a separate bowl. I added a large egg, 3 1/2 tablespoons of whole milk, followed by a 1/4 cup of honey, and then 3 tablespoons of a neutral tasting oil. I think I used veggie oil in this case. I gave the wet ingredients a thorough mix until it was all incorporated. Once that mixture was complete, I added the wet into the dry and gave that a thorough mix. I started with the whisk. That didn't really work too well. Had to move to my hands pretty quickly and started kneading that into a nice dough ball. After that mixture was formed into a dough ball, I let it rest for at least a half hour in its plastic wrap. You're going to want to let these rest in the cooler that you have. And to roll out the graham cracker, this was kind of a slow process. First, I floured my surface, and then I got to rolling. And I took this pretty slow. The dough was fairly brittle. It broke pretty easily, so slow and steady is the name of the game here. Eventually, it turned into a nice sheet, the thickness of the graham cracker that I wanted, and then I was done. Again, I just used a knife to cut these in the sizes that I wanted, and then I used a fork to perforate holes in these so that they could breathe a little bit when they were cooking and give them that signature graham cracker hole. To cook the graham crackers, I used a cast iron on a 2-burner stove. At first, I started it way too high heat. They browned pretty quickly, and I think that's because of all of the honey that's in the dough. So I set those to a lower temperature and let them cook for probably about 20 to 25 minutes in the pan. I made sure to flip them every once in a while to make sure one side wasn't getting too much color and that they were cooking evenly. Okay, so the graham crackers just about done. They might be a little soft, that's okay. And we're gonna assemble this bad boy. Eventually they got to a point where they turned out to be fairly crispy. Probably would have rolled them thinner next time, but that's okay. Got some nice browning on the graham crackers. When I was cooking the marshmallow, it took a really long time to brown. I think if you had like a handheld propane torch, it probably would have browned really quickly and gotten that caramely taste and color. But these took a while over the stove. Oh my gosh, I am playing with fire. But I just probably 1 minute. I think the hotter the heat, the better, because they started to droop after a while and create quite a mess over my stove. Good. The graham crackers are a little crispy, which is kind of nice. The marshmallow kind of like explodes in your mouth. There's a lot of mallow in there. It's tasty. Jet Puff will always have a special place in my heart, though. So I had this realization when I was making these graham crackers, and after I had finally eaten them, they took a lot of work, and I don't even want to talk about the dishes because there were a ton of dishes, which if you are trying this while you're camping, that's definitely something to consider. But then the taste, the graham crackers were good. They were a little bit tough. The marshmallow was delicious. I loved those, eating them raw just as a snack, untoasted. But it tasted gourmet. Like you got notes of honey, you got the cinnamon, you got the marshmallow, which was just delicious. It didn't taste artificial or processed at all like those Jet Puff ones. But the thing that I realized with those classic marshmallows is I think it's really similar to why so many people like McDonald's. And let me get there. It's like a nostalgic thing. There's this familiar taste. There's the smell that is the same every single time. And it's almost more nostalgic than actually good tasting. And I think that same theory can be applied to s'mores. They're really easy from the store with the Jet Puff marshmallows, the honey graham crackers. They're really easy, and they have that same taste that you remembered when you were a kid, and it tastes like a s'more. It's delicious. Is it a gourmet s'more? No, but it almost tastes like you're eating a totally different thing. So I think both have their place. I think this is definitely worth trying if you want to, push the limits of your culinary experiences outside. But otherwise, regular s'mores are definitely a phenomenal dessert in my book for while you're out camping. Let me know what you think of the video in the comments below. Are you going to try out this recipe on your next camping trip? And if you could subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, that'll help me out a lot. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.